The morning sun rose slowly over the capital city, spreading its golden light across the tall buildings and marble walls of the embassy district. The air was still, filled with the sound of fluttering flags and the faint rhythm of footsteps echoing on the stone path. At the entrance of the royal embassy stood a guard named Ravi, a man known for his calm face and perfect discipline. Ravi had been a royal guard for 6 years. Every morning he stood in his post wearing a neatly pressed uniform of blue and white, with a polished silver badge on his chest. His eyes never wandered, his hands stayed firm on his weapon, and his shoulders were straight like a statue. He was proud of his duty because it was not just a job for him. It was an honor to represent his country's dignity in front of guests from all over the world. The embassy gate was wide open that day because a foreign delegation was expected to visit. The staff moved quickly, arranging flowers near the entrance, adjusting flags, and polishing brass railings. The sound of car engines in the distance meant the guests were close. Ravi did not move. He could hear everything around him, but his training taught him to stay focused no matter what happened. Soon, a line of black cars stopped outside. Men and women dressed in dark suits stepped out, followed by one tall man with sharp eyes and a confident walk. His name was Officer Martin, a visiting security advisor from a foreign country. He had a strong personality, and people around him treated him with great respect. He was known to be direct and proud, always expecting others to recognize his authority. As Officer Martin entered the embassy gate, his eyes caught Ravi standing at his post. He noticed how perfectly still the guard was, not even blinking as he watched ahead. The officer stopped walking and turned toward him. "This guard looks serious," he said to his assistant with a faint smile. "Let's see how much discipline he really has." The assistant gave a small, worried look. "Sir, he is a royal guard. They are trained not to move during duty unless commanded by their own superiors." But Officer Martin was already walking closer. He stood in front of Ravi and studied him from head to toe. The guard's uniform was spotless. His shoes gleamed under the sun and his face showed no reaction. There was something about Ravi's calm that made even the officer curious. With a half smile, Officer Martin said loudly, "Guard, salute me." The words cut through the air like a sudden breeze. The staff members nearby turned their heads immediately. The other guard on duty shifted slightly but stayed silent. Everyone waited for Ravi's response, but Ravi did not move. His eyes stayed fixed straight ahead. His breathing remained slow and steady. The officer's smile faded. He repeated the command louder this time. "Guard," I said, "salute me." Still there was no reaction. Ravi's mind was calm, though his heart beat faster under his uniform. He knew very well that a royal guard's rule was sacred. He could only move or respond to the orders of the royal commander or someone officially assigned above him. No matter who spoke, a guard on duty could not break the rule. Around them, the atmosphere began to change. The embassy workers stopped what they were doing. Even the driver near the car leaned out slightly to see what was happening. A few tourists standing across the street started recording with their phones. The quiet morning had suddenly turned into a scene filled with tension. Officer Martin frowned. "Is he ignoring me?" he asked, turning to his assistant. "Sir," the assistant said softly, "he is following protocol. The Royal Guard cannot answer anyone who is not his superior. It's their code of conduct." The officer folded his arms. "In my country, when an officer gives a command, it is followed immediately. Discipline means obedience." The assistant looked uncomfortable but said nothing. The officer took a step closer, until he was only a few feet away from Ravi. He could see the small reflection of sunlight on the guard's cheek. Ravi's eyes did not even blink. Inside, Ravi felt the pressure growing. He could sense the eyes watching him, the murmurs in the crowd, the foreign officer standing right in front of him waiting for a reaction. But his training echoed in his head. Never move, never speak, never break formation unless ordered by the commander. He kept his posture strong, knowing that one wrong move could bring shame to the entire guard unit. Officer Martin's expression grew harder. "I am giving you a direct command," he said again. "You are standing before an officer of a partner nation. Salute me now." Ravi remained still. His silence seemed to speak louder than any words could. The foreign officer's tone rose slightly, and the staff around started whispering nervously. Some thought the guard was being rude, while others understood he was simply doing his duty. At that moment, Ambassador Sharma, the senior diplomat of the embassy, walked out of the main hall. He had been informed about the noise outside. His calm face and graceful walk brought a sudden sense of relief to the staff. He stopped near the gate, noticing the small crowd gathered. "What seems to be the problem?" he asked in a gentle but firm voice. Officer Martin turned to him immediately. "Your guard refuses to salute me," he said. "In my country, such behavior would be seen as disrespect." Ambassador Sharma looked at Ravi, then back at the officer. His expression remained polite. "Our guards," he began, "represent our royal code. When they are on duty, they are not permitted to take instructions from anyone except their commander or the royal office. Their silence is not a sign of disrespect. It is a sign of loyalty." The officer blinked in surprise. The people nearby went quiet again. Ravi stood in his place, still as stone, his heart beating steadily. The ambassador continued, "Our guard is not ignoring you, sir. He is honoring the code that keeps our embassy disciplined. Every visitor who enters these gates is safe because of that very loyalty." Officer Martin glanced at Ravi once more, this time with a different look. The frustration on his face slowly changed into realization. He understood that the guard was not defying him. He was protecting a principle. The atmosphere softened slightly. The ambassador smiled and said kindly, "I assure you, sir, the royal guard means no offense. If you wish, once his duty is over, he will meet you personally. But during his post, he cannot move or speak." The officer nodded slowly, taking a breath. "I see. In that case, I may have misjudged the situation." The ambassador replied, "No harm done, sir. Discipline looks different in every uniform, but respect remains the same everywhere." The officer gave a polite nod and turned back toward his delegation. As he walked inside the embassy, the small crowd dispersed quietly. Some of the onlookers whispered about what had happened. Others simply looked at Ravi with new admiration. Ravi remained motionless just as before. He could hear footsteps moving away, the quiet hum of conversation fading back into normal rhythm. Inside his heart, he felt calm. He had done what he was trained to do, to protect the honor of his duty without saying a word. The rest of the morning passed peacefully. Birds landed on the embassy wall, and the flags waved gently in the wind. The visitors inside discussed meetings and agreements, but outside, one silent guard stood as a reminder that true strength does not always come from speaking or moving. Sometimes it lies in standing firm, no matter who is watching. That day, a foreign officer learned the meaning of royal discipline, and a royal guard silently became a symbol of quiet courage. The embassy returned to its calm state, but everyone who had witnessed the event knew they had seen something special. A moment where pride met patience, and respect was earned through silence. The rest of the morning at the royal embassy felt quiet, but the silence carried a strange weight. The earlier scene between Officer Martin and the royal guard Ravi had already spread through whispers among the staff and visitors. Everyone who had seen it could not stop talking about how the guard had stood so still, even when a foreign officer gave him a direct command. Inside the main hall, the atmosphere was more formal. Long tables were arranged neatly with flags from both nations standing side by side. Crystal glasses, documents, and nameplates lined the meeting table. The smell of freshly brewed tea filled the air. It was meant to be a friendly diplomatic visit, but a small spark of tension now hovered around. Officer Martin walked beside his assistant, keeping his expression serious. He did not speak much, but it was clear that his thoughts were still on the guard outside. He had been trained to expect obedience from soldiers everywhere he went. In his mind, a guard refusing to respond felt like a challenge, even though the ambassador had explained the situation. Ambassador Sharma noticed this. As he guided the delegation toward the meeting room, he said softly, "I hope our royal protocol did not make you uncomfortable, Officer Martin. Our guards follow very strict traditions. They mean no disrespect to anyone." The officer nodded politely. "I understand, Ambassador. It is simply different from how we operate. In my line of work, even silence can feel like defiance. But I am learning that in your culture, silence can also mean loyalty." The ambassador smiled. "Yes, indeed. Our guards are taught that honor is not only in action but also in restraint." The conversation ended there, but the air still carried a quiet unease. The two sides sat down for their discussions about cooperation, security, and cultural exchange. Every word was measured, every smile polite. Yet behind the formal talk, the earlier moment at the gate still lingered in everyone's minds. Outside, Ravi continued to stand in his position. The sun was now high above and the heat pressed down on his shoulders. Still, his posture did not change. The people passing by looked at him with curiosity. Some of them had already heard what had happened earlier. A few visitors even came closer to see the guard who had not moved despite being ordered by a foreign officer. Ravi did not react. His training was deep in his heart. From the day he joined the royal service, he was taught that his duty was more than standing guard. It was about carrying the pride of the nation on his shoulders. Every rule had meaning. Every movement had purpose. Breaking one rule could break the trust of his entire unit. He remembered his instructor's words during training. A guard's silence is his voice. A guard's stillness is his strength. When you wear this uniform, you are not just a man. You are a symbol. Those words had shaped Ravi's mindset. So when the officer had ordered him to salute, his body had wanted to obey out of natural respect, but his mind had reminded him of his oath. The oath always came first. Back inside, the meeting continued. Officer Martin tried to focus on the documents in front of him, but his thoughts drifted back to the guard. Something about that moment kept bothering him. He could not decide if he had been wrong to give the command, or if the guard had been too rigid. During a short break, he stepped out into the courtyard. The bright sunlight made him squint. From a distance, he could see Ravi still standing at the gate, unchanged, steady, and silent. The officer walked a few steps closer and stopped. For a moment, he just observed. There was something about the guard's discipline that fascinated him. The embassy staff nearby noticed but said nothing. They knew that the officer was curious, perhaps even impressed. Officer Martin spoke softly to his assistant. "He has not moved for hours. How does he manage that?" The assistant replied, "Sir, they train for years to master control. The Royal Guard must be able to stand still through heat, rain, or noise. It is part of their tradition." The officer nodded slowly. "Discipline like that is rare. In my country, our soldiers train hard, but this is a different kind of strength. It is quiet and steady." At that moment, a light breeze passed through the courtyard. A flag nearby waved gently, casting a moving shadow over the guard's face. The officer noticed how the guard did not blink or turn his head. His respect for Ravi began to grow quietly. After the break, the meeting resumed, but now the tone was softer. Officer Martin asked more questions about the country's traditions and rules. The ambassador explained patiently, describing how the Royal Guard was one of the oldest divisions, formed to represent both strength and dignity. They were trained not only for protection but also for honor. "They stand as symbols," the ambassador said. "Even in silence, they teach others what respect means." The words stayed with Martin. For the first time, he began to understand that the guard's lack of reaction was not arrogance. It was devotion. Later that afternoon, when the meetings ended, the delegation prepared to leave. The cars were ready again at the gate. As the group walked out, Officer Martin slowed his steps and turned toward Ravi one last time. The guard was still there, eyes forward, posture unbroken. Something inside Martin shifted. He walked closer again, but this time there was no pride or anger in his face. Only curiosity and quiet admiration. He stood in front of Ravi, remembering the earlier moment when he had ordered the salute. He looked at the guard for a few seconds, then said in a calm voice, "You have great discipline, guard. You follow your duty well." Ravi did not respond as expected. His silence continued, but now it carried a sense of mutual understanding. The ambassador, who was watching from nearby, smiled to himself. He knew that the tension had faded. What began as a misunderstanding had turned into silent respect. As the delegation left, the staff began to relax. The atmosphere of the embassy felt lighter again. But deep inside the minds of everyone who had witnessed the morning event, a question remained. How could a single act of silence hold so much meaning? In the days that followed, the story began to spread beyond the embassy walls. A few people who had recorded the scene uploaded the clips to social media. The video of the foreign officer commanding the guard and the guard's calm reaction gained attention quickly. People wrote comments about the discipline of the Royal Guard. Some praised Ravi's dedication. Others admired the peaceful way the situation had been handled. The embassy did not release any official statement, but inside the walls, many staff members quietly felt proud. Ravi became a topic of conversation during lunch breaks. Some younger guards even started calling him the Silent Wall. Ravi himself did not know how popular the story had become. He continued his duty every day the same way as before. He never looked for attention or praise. In his heart, he believed that a guard's true success was not in being known, but in doing his duty without failure. Officer Martin, on the other hand, returned to his hotel that evening with a different feeling. He wrote a short note in his travel journal about what had happened. In his notes, he wrote about how a man's silence had taught him a lesson about patience, respect, and self-control. For the first time in many years, he realized that power was not always about commanding others. Sometimes it was about understanding when to step back. The next morning, before leaving the city, he requested another visit to the embassy. The ambassador agreed. Everyone wondered why he wanted to come again so soon. When he arrived, he asked quietly if he could meet the guard once his shift ended. The ambassador smiled and said, "Of course, but you will have to wait until his post is over. He cannot move until his replacement arrives." Officer Martin waited patiently near the gate, watching as the sun climbed high once again. The same guard, Ravi, stood firm at his place. There was something peaceful about seeing such focus. It reminded the officer that respect was not always demanded. Sometimes it was earned through action, or in this case through stillness. By the time Ravi's shift ended, the tension of the previous day had turned into mutual admiration. The embassy staff, the visitors, and even the officer himself now saw the guard differently. He was no longer just a man in uniform. He had become a quiet example of dignity and strength. That day ended with no raised voices, no conflict, and no pride. It ended with understanding. And though no one said it aloud, everyone who had witnessed the events knew they had seen something rare. A lesson about honor that spoke without words. The next morning at the royal embassy began quietly. The sunlight touched the walls and the gates glowed softly under its warmth. The smell of fresh paint, flowers, and morning tea mixed in the air. It looked like a peaceful day, but inside the embassy, people still remembered what had happened the previous morning. The story of the silent guard, Ravi, had already spread among the workers. Some talked about how he stood like a statue even when ordered by the foreign officer. Others said it showed how loyal and disciplined the royal guards were. A few thought the event might have caused tension between the two countries. Inside his small quarters behind the embassy, Ravi prepared for another day of duty. His room was simple, with a small bed, a wooden chair, and a table that held his neatly folded uniform. On the wall hung his oath card, a piece of paper that reminded him of the code every guard had to live by. It read, "I serve in silence, I move with honor, I obey my command, and I protect my nation's pride." As he put on his uniform and checked every button, Ravi's mind replayed the moment from yesterday. He remembered the officer's sharp voice, the crowd's whispers, and his own heartbeat trying to stay calm. He had done his duty exactly as trained, but part of him still wondered if he had embarrassed anyone. When he stepped outside, the training commander, Major Arvind, was waiting near the yard. The major was a tall man with kind eyes but a strict tone. "Ravi," he said, "I heard about what happened yesterday. You handled it well. The royal office called this morning. They were pleased with your conduct." Ravi stood straight and replied, "Thank you, sir. I only followed the code." The major smiled slightly. "Yes, and you followed it perfectly. But remember, a guard's silence can sometimes make others misunderstand. Some people see stillness as pride, not discipline. We must always make sure our silence speaks with respect." Ravi nodded. "Yes, sir." Later, as he walked to his post, he noticed a few workers greeting him with quiet smiles. They respected him now, not just for standing still, but for showing what true duty meant. Yet Ravi did not let pride touch his heart. In his mind, he was just doing what he had promised to do when he took the royal oath. At the same time, Officer Martin was in his hotel room preparing for another visit to the embassy. His meeting with the ambassador had gone well, and he wanted to learn more about the guard unit that had impressed him so much. He had spent part of the night reading about the history of the Royal Guard. He discovered that the unit was older than the embassy itself, founded many generations ago to protect royal symbols, important guests, and sacred places. He realized that their silence was not only a rule but also a tradition born from centuries of respect. The more he read, the more he admired the system. In his notebook, he wrote a few lines. "Silence can be stronger than command. A man who controls himself is the hardest to defeat." That afternoon, when he returned to the embassy for a follow-up discussion, the first person he noticed again was Ravi standing at the gate. The sight brought back the moment from before, but this time the feeling was different. There was no irritation, only curiosity and respect. As he walked past, he gave a polite nod. Ravi did not move, but Martin could almost sense the quiet dignity behind that motionless face. Inside, the ambassador greeted him warmly. "Welcome back, Officer Martin. You seem more relaxed today." The officer smiled slightly. "Yes, Ambassador. I came to understand that your guards carry more than weapons. They carry meaning." The ambassador chuckled softly. "That is true. Their silence is not emptiness. It is full of respect." During their discussion, the officer mentioned his interest in meeting the guard when his shift was over. The ambassador agreed and informed the commander. Major Arvind later told Ravi, "After your shift, the foreign officer wants to speak with you. Remember to stay respectful, but you may talk freely once your post is complete." Ravi simply replied, "Understood, sir." The rest of the day went by smoothly. Visitors entered and left the embassy. Documents were exchanged, and the staff carried on with their usual work. Yet many eyes often turned toward the gate, where Ravi stood as always, firm and composed. The incident had made him a quiet example for younger guards. Evening arrived, and the sky turned orange and gold. When the replacement guard arrived, Ravi finally took a step back from his post. His legs were stiff, but his face showed no sign of fatigue. The commander gestured for him to meet the officer inside. Ravi entered the hall, where Officer Martin waited near the reception area. The officer stood up when Ravi approached. For a few seconds, both men simply looked at each other. Then the officer smiled and extended his hand. "It is good to finally speak to you, Guard Ravi." Ravi saluted smartly before shaking hands. "It is an honor, sir." The officer said, "Yesterday I did not understand your silence. I thought it was resistance. Now I know it was strength. You reminded me that true discipline does not need to shout. It only needs to stand firm." Ravi replied humbly, "I only did what my oath required, sir. The rule is not mine to change." Officer Martin nodded. "Still, you taught me something valuable. In my country, we teach our soldiers to act fast and speak strong, but you have shown me that control is another kind of courage." The ambassador, who stood nearby, added warmly, "Both of you have shown respect in your own way. Sometimes two different worlds need only one quiet moment to understand each other." They all sat together for a short time, sharing tea. The officer asked Ravi about his training, and Ravi explained how guards learned to stand still for hours, how they practiced breathing and balance, and how every small movement had a meaning. He told him that even during long hours under the hot sun or in cold rain, a guard's biggest enemy was not the weather, but impatience. The officer listened with full attention. He realized how much effort went into maintaining such calmness. He said, "It must be difficult standing for hours without moving or speaking." Ravi smiled faintly. "At first it is hard, but with time, your body learns to be still, and your mind learns to be quiet. Then it becomes easy." Their conversation continued, simple yet deep. The officer felt a quiet respect growing inside him. He saw in Ravi's words a wisdom that came not from books but from years of discipline. When the meeting ended, Officer Martin stood and said, "Thank you, Ravi. You have changed how I see discipline. I will carry this lesson back home." Ravi saluted again. "Thank you, sir. It was an honor to serve." As the officer left the embassy, he turned one last time toward the gate where Ravi had stood earlier. The place looked calm again, as if the incident had never happened. But something inside both men had changed. The next day, a small article appeared in a local newspaper titled, "Silent Guard Teaches Lesson in Honor." It told the story of how a royal guard's silence had impressed a foreign officer. The piece described how respect could come from understanding, not power. The story quickly gained attention among readers. At the embassy, the staff read the article during their breaks. Many smiled with pride. Major Arvind said, "This is how true respect is built, not through orders but through example." Ravi continued his duty the same way as always. He did not speak about the newspaper or the attention. To him, fame was nothing compared to the peace of doing his work correctly. Every time he stood at the gate, he remembered that his silence could speak louder than any words. Days turned into weeks, and visitors continued to come and go. But the story of the silent guard remained fresh in people's minds. It became part of the embassy's history. For Officer Martin, the experience became one of his most valuable lessons. When he returned home, he shared it with his team during training. He told them about a guard who never spoke, never moved, yet taught a lesson about honor that no speech could match. The bond between the two countries grew stronger, not because of politics or trade, but because of a simple act of discipline. A salute never given had turned into a message of respect that crossed borders and touched hearts. Ravi never asked for recognition, but his name quietly became a symbol of what true duty meant. His silence had not just protected the rules of his service, it had spoken for his nation. And so, at the gates of the royal embassy, life continued as always, with the flag flying high and the guards standing straight. The world outside moved quickly, but inside those gates stood men like Ravi, whose quiet strength reminded everyone that true respect is earned through patience, not pride. The days following the embassy event passed calmly, yet the story of the silent guard continued to grow. People from different parts of the city began to talk about it. They spoke of how a single guard's silence had shown what true respect and discipline meant. Newspapers wrote short pieces about the incident, and some reporters tried to contact the embassy to learn more about the mysterious guard named Ravi. Inside the embassy, life slowly returned to normal. Meetings continued, guests arrived and left, and the staff carried on with their daily duties. Yet every now and then someone would glance toward the main gate and feel a quiet pride knowing that the guard who stood there was no ordinary man. Ravi, however, remained unchanged. He never sought attention or talked about what happened. For him, the world outside the gates was full of voices, but his duty was silence. He believed that the greatest service a man could do was to stay loyal without expecting reward. One morning, Ambassador Sharma received a message from the royal office. The palace had learned about the story and wanted to honor the embassy guards for their dedication. The message said that the royal commander himself would visit to inspect the guards and speak about their service. The announcement brought excitement among the staff. Major Arvind gathered all the guards in the training yard and said, "The royal commander will arrive next week. Everyone must be ready. Keep your uniforms perfect and your posture sharp. This is an important visit." Ravi stood among the line of guards, listening quietly. He felt no nervousness, only determination to represent his unit well. Meanwhile, far away in his home country, Officer Martin was also preparing for his return journey. Before leaving, he sent a personal letter to the ambassador expressing his gratitude for the hospitality he had received. In his letter, he mentioned Ravi by name and requested that his appreciation be conveyed to the guard. He wrote that the event had changed his understanding of discipline and that he hoped to visit again someday. The letter reached the embassy a few days before the commander's visit. Ambassador Sharma smiled as he read it. He called for Ravi later that day and said, "Ravi, the officer from the foreign delegation has written to us. He wanted to thank you personally. He said you taught him a valuable lesson through your silence." Ravi saluted and replied humbly, "I only did my duty, sir." The ambassador nodded. "That is what makes it special. You did not need to speak to be heard. Remember this, Ravi. True respect is never demanded. It is earned quietly." The morning of the royal visit arrived. The embassy grounds were freshly cleaned. The flags were raised high and the guards stood in their best uniforms. The royal commander arrived in a black car, followed by 2 aides. He was a man of calm strength, known for his fairness and wisdom. As he stepped out, the guards stood at attention. Their polished boots shone under the sunlight, and their uniforms reflected the pride of their service. The commander slowly walked down the line, inspecting each guard with a sharp eye. When he stopped in front of Ravi, he paused. "You are the one they call the silent guard, aren't you?" he asked. Ravi remained still and replied respectfully, "Yes, sir." The commander studied his face for a moment and said, "I read the reports. You stood firm under pressure, and you followed your code without hesitation. That is what true discipline means. But tell me, when the officer gave you the order, what went through your mind?" Ravi hesitated for a second before answering. "Sir, I felt the urge to respond out of respect, but my training reminded me that a guard on post cannot take commands from anyone except his commander. It was not easy, but I knew that obedience to duty must come before personal reaction." The commander nodded thoughtfully. "And you were not angry or afraid?" "No, sir," Ravi said calmly. I was focused only on doing what was right. The commander smiled slightly. That is the answer I hoped to hear. He turned to the others and said loudly, "This man represents the heart of our service. Discipline is not about power. It is about patience. It is about holding your ground with respect, even when misunderstood. Let his example remind you all that loyalty needs no words." The other guards felt inspired by his words. Some even looked at Ravi with quiet admiration. After the inspection, a small ceremony was held inside the hall. The commander handed Ravi a certificate of honor for his exceptional service. The staff clapped as the guard received it, his expression humble as ever. The ambassador spoke afterwards, saying, "In a world full of noise, it was silence that taught a lesson. We are proud to have guards who serve with such dignity." Later that afternoon, after the ceremony ended, Ravi stood once again at his post. The honor he received did not change how he carried himself. He stood the same way as before, firm and focused. But inside he felt a quiet sense of peace. He knew that his duty had not only protected the embassy, but had also shown others the meaning of honor. While he stood there, a small car stopped by the gate. A young boy stepped out holding a package wrapped in brown paper. He handed it to the security assistant and said, "This is from the foreign officer for the guard named Ravi." The assistant brought the package to Ravi after his shift ended. Inside was a neatly folded letter and a small medal engraved with the words, "Respect Beyond Borders." The letter read, "To Guard Ravi. When I gave you that order, I thought authority was everything. You showed me that true strength is in self-control. You stood silent, but you spoke to my conscience. I will carry your example as a lesson to my team and to myself. With deep respect, Officer Martin." Ravi read the letter slowly. He felt a warmth in his heart. It was not pride, but gratitude. He realized that sometimes a single act, even a small one, could reach across nations. He placed the letter safely in his locker and kept the medal hidden inside a small box. He did not speak of it to others. It was a personal reminder that doing what is right always leaves a mark, even if no one sees it. The following week, the embassy received more letters from people who had read about the story in newspapers. Some wrote about how it inspired them to work harder. Others said it reminded them of the value of patience and humility. The story had grown far beyond the walls of the embassy. During one evening break, Major Arvind said to Ravi, "You have become a lesson to many, my boy. You may not realize it, but you have changed how people see the Royal Guard." Ravi smiled and replied, "If my silence helped someone understand duty better, then it was worth it, sir." The commander, who was visiting again that day, overheard their conversation. He said with a kind tone, "You see, Ravi, loyalty and humility are rare together. You have both. Never forget that your silence spoke louder than any speech could." As the days went by, the attention around the event began to fade, but the memory stayed alive. Inside the embassy, the guards often trained with renewed discipline, remembering the example set by Ravi. Outside, people who passed by the embassy sometimes paused for a moment to admire the guards at their posts, thinking of the story they had heard. One evening, when Ravi's shift was ending, he looked at the flag waving above the embassy. The sky was turning red and gold with the setting sun. He took a slow breath and thought about how everything had begun with a simple misunderstanding. What had once been an awkward moment had turned into something meaningful. He understood that duty was not only about following orders, but also about carrying values in silence. It was about standing for something larger than oneself. He knew that many would forget his name with time, but the message of his action would stay, and so, as the last rays of light touched the embassy gate, Ravi stood tall, proud yet humble, a man whose silence had spoken across nations and hearts. Weeks had passed since the ceremony, and life at the royal embassy had returned to its usual rhythm. The guards stood in their places, the staff moved through the halls, and visitors from different nations came and went. Yet beneath the calm surface, something had quietly changed. The event that had started with a misunderstanding had become a lasting lesson for everyone. Every morning, the embassy staff now greeted the guards with more respect. They had always appreciated their service, but now they understood it on a deeper level. When they saw Ravi standing at his post, they no longer saw just a man in uniform. They saw a symbol of patience and honor. Ravi, as always, continued his duty without showing pride. The medal and letter from Officer Martin stayed safely inside a box in his small room. He never spoke about them, but he often looked at them before leaving for work. They reminded him that true recognition came not from words or applause, but from knowing that his actions had carried meaning. One quiet morning, Ambassador Sharma invited the staff and guards for a small gathering in the embassy courtyard. It was not an official event, only a moment to bring everyone together. The ambassador stood at a wooden podium and said, "We work in a place where people from many nations meet. Every gesture we make carries the name of our country. What happened here a few weeks ago reminded us that respect does not need noise, it only needs sincerity." He then looked at Ravi, who stood at the edge of the crowd. There are people who speak to be heard, and there are people whose silence speaks for them. Today I want to thank all our guards who remind us of this truth every day. The crowd clapped warmly. Ravi bowed his head slightly but said nothing. The moment passed quietly, but the feeling stayed in everyone's hearts. After the gathering, some new guards approached Ravi. One of them, a young recruit named Knighton, said, "Sir, we all heard your story during training. It gave us strength. When we stand in the sun for long hours, we think of how you stood that day and did not move." Ravi smiled gently. "You will learn that the hardest part of this job is not standing still, but keeping your mind calm. The body can be trained easily, but true discipline comes from the heart." The young guards nodded with admiration. They realized that what Ravi had done was not something they could learn in a single day. It came from years of patience and quiet understanding. Meanwhile, Officer Martin returned to his own country, but he often spoke about the event during his lectures and training sessions. He told young officers, "There was a guard I once met in a foreign land who taught me that power does not come from commanding others, but from commanding yourself." His students listened carefully, and some even began reading about the Royal Guard tradition. The story had crossed borders and reached people who had never even visited the embassy. One afternoon, several months later, a letter arrived at the embassy addressed to Ravi. It was from Officer Martin again. The letter read, "Dear Ravi, I hope you are well. Since my return, I have shared the story of our meeting with many people. It has inspired others to understand discipline in a new way. I have also proposed a new exchange program between our nations, so that guards and officers from both sides can learn from each other. Your action started something bigger than either of us expected. Thank you for showing the world that silence can be a teacher." Ravi read the letter carefully, his heart filled with quiet happiness. He had never imagined that his small act of duty would grow into something that connected two countries. He wrote back a simple reply thanking the officer for his kindness and wishing him success in his work. Over time, more visitors began coming to the embassy, curious about the royal guards. Some asked to take photos, others simply stood for a moment to watch them in silence. The guards did not react, but inside, they felt proud to represent their nation's strength through calmness. During one of these visits, a group of students arrived for a cultural tour. Their teacher told them the story of the silent guard. The children listened with wide eyes. One little boy raised his hand and asked, "Why did the guard not just salute? It would have been easier." The teacher smiled and said, "Because sometimes doing the easy thing is not the right thing." The guard followed his duty, even when it was hard. That is what made it special. The boy nodded slowly, understanding that true respect was not always about pleasing others, but about staying loyal to what is right. Inside the embassy, the guards' training program began to include a short lesson about the event. It reminded every new recruit that their uniform carried not just power but meaning. The instructor would say, "When you stand at your post, remember Guard Ravi." He showed the world that silence can hold more weight than words. Ravi continued his daily routine with the same discipline. He woke early, cleaned his uniform, polished his boots, and stood at his position from sunrise until his shift ended. Some days were long, some were quiet, but his purpose never changed. He believed that serving with honesty was the highest reward a person could achieve. One evening, as the sun set behind the embassy walls, the ambassador came to the gate for a walk. He saw Ravi standing as still as ever. The ambassador stopped beside him and said softly, "You know, Ravi, when I first joined the service, I thought speeches and negotiations were the strongest tools of diplomacy. But now I realize that sometimes silence builds the strongest bridges." Ravi replied quietly, "Thank you, sir. I only try to do my part." The ambassador smiled. "And that is why your part matters. You did not only guard these gates, you guarded our nation's dignity." As the ambassador walked away, Ravi looked up at the flag waving in the evening breeze. It shone against the soft orange sky. He felt a sense of peace that words could not describe. He realized that even though the world outside was full of change, the values of duty, respect, and honor would always remain the same. Later that night, in his small room, Ravi took out the box containing the letter and medal. He placed them on his table and sat for a while in silence. The light from the small lamp made the metal shine softly. He thought of all the people who had been part of the story, the officer who had once misunderstood him, the ambassador who had supported him, the commander who had praised him, and the guards who now looked up to him. He felt grateful not because of recognition, but because he had stayed true to himself when it mattered most. He whispered a small prayer for strength to keep serving with the same honesty every day. The next morning, life began again as usual. The city outside the embassy was busy with traffic and noise, but inside the gates, calmness ruled. Visitors arrived, officials went about their work, and the guards stood tall. People often slowed down as they passed the embassy, remembering the story of the silent guard. Years later, when Ravi retired from service, the embassy held a simple farewell ceremony for him. The ambassador, now older, stood before him and said, "You began your journey as one guard among many, but your dedication made you a part of our nation's history. You proved that one moment of integrity can speak across years." Ravi accepted the farewell with a humble smile. He did not give a speech. He simply saluted and bowed his head in respect. When he left the embassy for the last time, the younger guard stood in a straight line and saluted him as he walked past. The air was filled with quiet pride. He walked down the path slowly, carrying his cap under his arm, feeling both the weight and peace of his years of service. As he reached the main gate one last time, he looked back at the tall building, the waving flag, and the guard standing firm. A soft smile crossed his face. He knew that the story of that one silent day would live on long after he was gone. Some stories fade, but some become lessons, and the lesson of the silent guard would remain clear for generations to come. True strength does not shout, true respect does not demand, and true honor does not seek attention. It simply stands firm, silent, and steady, just like a guard who never moved when the world watched.